Test. Oh. I was told to do this presentation on Bahasa, so if you don't mind, so I will mix it with some English for you. Okay. Thank you and good morning. I would like to thank Anahata for this opportunity. In today's presentation, I was asked to present about the starting of Radar. It was a bit confusing for me because we are only 5 years old studio. So every project is our starting project. So we would like to think the first round of portfolio is as our first season of presentation. Oke, saya perkenalkan, saya Richard, saya mewakili tim Radar di sini. Kami tidak dari Bintaro, kebetulan kami agak meleset sedikit ke Jakarta Barat. Jadi tamu di Bintaro ini. Kita memang masih sekitar 20-an tim yang berfokus untuk membuat proyek-proyek yang lebih eksperimental dengan tujuan, dengan background adalah ini. Jadi ketika kita mulai, kita duduk bersama dan kita berdiskusi bagaimana caranya kita membuat sesuatu yang memang kenapa kita terlahir menjadi arsitek di Indonesia. This is very weird situation gitu. With a developing economy background, what our purpose to be born here and raised here, and what is our practice supposed to be. And then kita realize bahwa Indonesia is very special karena kita adalah satu-satunya negara archipelagos terbesar di dunia gitu ya. Jadi dengan artian nggak ada tuh dengan catatan orang 270 juta tersebar di 15.000 pulau gitu. Nah, kenapa ini menarik gitu ya? Sebelum saya akan masuk lebih jauh, karena sebenarnya Indonesia ini kita lari terlalu cepat gitu. Jadi banyak orang bilang kita tertinggal, I disagree. So what happened adalah ketika kita berpraktek ini, kita coba trace back tentang the real growth of architecture. Ketika kita berpikir benar-benar real growth of architecture, kita itu hanya sekitar 70 tahun. Yes, dan lately hanya berkembang dalam 20-30 tahun terakhir gitu. Kalau Anda benar-benar realize dan juga ikutin benar-benar pertumbuhan arsitektur di Indonesia. Have you ever asked why? Termasuk saya yakin Anda di sini di dunia konstruksi sebagai arsitek, kontraktor, developer. Have you wonder why? In the last 2 decades, suddenly Indonesia produced so many talented architects, right? And then the reason, whether you like it or not, is capitalism. That's the thing. Whether you like it or not, we have to embrace capitalism because that's now is the main driven of our background. So we started as like for 450 years. That's like almost 5 centuries. Indonesia is architecture beyond border. Jadi vernacularity itu sebagai brand gitu. Jadi ketika orang embracing enggak semua harus ada satu guidance yang benar. I disagree. Ya, enggak berarti di sebuah approach atau sebuah negara harus punya satu DNA yang sama. I really disagree. Although there are some that is overlapping. Karena before the notion of nation, architecture really is as a stamp of brand. So every culture has its own architecture. And because they were disconnected with others, they don't know, right? So it's supposed to be different. It characterizes their own uniqueness. But suddenly, during our colonization with Dutch, for almost 4 centuries, that's a long time to be colonized. Whether you like it or not, Dutch helped us as an agent of modern architecture. What is modern architecture? As you know, modern architecture tells you there is one way to do it. Only one right things to do it. Right? And we disagree. And then like suddenly we got our independence back and we are not ready. In less than 1 century, now architecture is capital-driven architecture. That's the real thing. Architecture becomes the capital-driven. You can see the growth of architectures from how much money being invested, right? You can see all the good architecture will be compiled into the places where the capital most invested. Right, so it's a form follow capitals. That's the word, and then architecture now become the real estate for the real rich people, right? Okay, and then like how can we make changes about this? This is the main question we asked in Radar when we first started our journey. So we realized Indonesia is different, so we cannot do our practice like in every other countries. In order for us to make sustainable as something that people want to adopt, we cannot do anything. We are just an agent. What we can do is to inspire. So our goal is to how to decentralize sustainable architectures, right? The idea is, as a developing country, sustainable architecture will only follow where the capital goes. So as long as we kept producing good sustainable architecture, there is very sustainable in business for client. They will think it's a good idea for them to adopt this, right? And multiply it. And then like by itself, it will spread like virus everywhere across nations. And then we want to educate the developer and the market that sustainable design is a good business. That's the virus we want to spread in our practices. So it's an ongoing journey, but how can we marry the involvement of nature with the canvas of developing country economy? That's the main thing. And we realized that the language that we should use to the client is their language, in which is business languages. So what we are saying is that design should be profitable, but at the same time, you gotta be experimental. Why? Because we gotta ensure the decades property investment values. As now you can see, we have our fellow international architects around here that can agree to this testament that design is inflated. So as our money, design is also inflating. So what used to be very cool, what used to be very interesting 10 years ago, now suddenly it's everywhere. So not really timeless. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So that's the language we want to sell to the client, that actually by doing more experimental projects, your property is actually saving value. So the way you count it as a depreciation value, you can push it longer into 20 years or something. At the same time, how can we make sure this capital driven doesn't really kill our full notion of sustainable architectures? Is by leading through examples. Jadi in just 20 years, 2 decades, and it's not counting the last 1 decade from 2013 to 2023, because we haven't received the valid data about this. It's very crazy to think about, because if you flew around the world, you ask about Indonesia, people kept asking, are you an architect from Indonesia? Do they have architecture in Indonesia? They kept thinking Indonesia as a jungle, right? Which is an irony, because as you can see, major Indonesian cities is even has a lower person to green area ratio compared to Singapore, which was just a tiny island. That's an irony right there. This is very pathetic. So during this presentation, we're just trying to bring a few projects that we think representing what we want to push, not necessarily from the value of investment, but the notion of approaches. So this one is just a small coffee shop, coffee garden, which we initiate is only about 1,000 square meters on-site plans. It's very simple, really. It's just interesting why would, most people perceive this quite well. The idea is just how to create a garden, because I wanted to make a public spaces, but as a private, as a consultant, the question would be like, what can we really do, right? Because we are so not proactive as an architects. So we were thinking, if government cannot provide a good public park, public garden for most people, why can't we try to do some in exchange for a good cup of coffee, right? As a maintenance fee for the places. So it's not really a building, it's just a garden. And then like it was enveloped by this notion of facade. There is nothing, because if I say, come to the park, nobody would come. They would be very traumatized. So the idea is, how can we embed spaces in between a very simple notion of gardens into a series of connecting trees that create a path leading to sequencing of spaces. Sangat sederhana dan juga sangat low budget. Jadi sebenarnya Anda bisa lihat bahwa tidak ada really indoor spaces dalam tempat ini gitu ya. Mungkin very small percentage. Jadi KLB-nya sendiri dari 1000 ini sebenarnya nggak nyampe 30% gitu. Dan ketika kita buat ide ini, developer screams like, "Are you crazy? How can we sell the investment with just 30% KLB, right? GFA, and then like, what if it's raining because it's tropics, right? The sellers will go down, and then because luckily this one is ours, so we're trying to show them what if it doesn't rain, the sellers will go up like crazy." So we try to suggest to the developer to see the glass half full rather than half empty, and then the spaces would be the pioneer. Now it's way more green than this, and we are hoping that the appreciation of the landscape will grow even further in just 5 to 10 years. So it becomes really like a jungle right now. And then the interior spaces that was created is nothing but more the causal of the architecture approaches with nature. That's the first example that we are trying to spread. And then like we believe that this project is quite successful in the notion that how fast the virus spread. Because this small property costs like less than 500,000 USD, but then like in terms of the revenue, it could generate the same revenue per day as like you invest 150 keys for 4-star hotel in Jakarta. So we believe this is very successful, and then like once the developers see, ternyata bisa ya arsitektur yang terlihat lebih sustainable, AC-nya sedikit, ya dan ini tapi bisa benar-benar generating a lot of money, and all they care is money, it's okay. And then it spread like virus. So this project alone inspire many projects di Makassar, di Maluku, as far as I know di Bali, di Lombok gitu. Jadi from that notion, kalau kita menjadi inspirasi untuk menyebarkan desentralisasi sustainable architecture, we are succeeding gitu. And we are happy to be copied because we believe that it means we make a real impact and a real changes. Okay, and then people kept saying, okay, that's easy because you're doing like, you know what, like a coffee shop. It doesn't really happen, right? Let's take the challenge even further. So this project is a restaurant and bar in the heart of Jakarta in the SCBD. And the project was only given 3 months from design until it got built because the rent is very high. And then what unique is the existing has these 3 very humongous trees. So I think it's approximately 40 meters tall. And then like the competitor during the tender deciding because the price for the rent is very expensive, mereka mau pindahin aja pohonnya, which is it won't happen. Kalau pohon 40 meter kita pindahin dia pasti mati. Dasar gitu. So we won the tender because we've decided to make the space is all about the nature without harming the existing landscape itself. And then trying to harvest the water so we can reuse all the water to water all the existing greeneries on the side. So there are 5 trees intentionally, but the aircon one is 3. Yeah. So this is on the junction, but this picture was taken I think a month ago. Now it's way more green than this. The idea is how not to make very high-end places very unsustainable. Of course, the aircon itself is ensuring that we consume quite a lot of energy. But then aside from that, we can, there's many factors in sustainable architecture. I want to bring boring detail here, but the idea is we can make it very simple. That's why so we're deciding to make the grid is very small, just 3 meter by 3 by 3, so it's very fast, less waste, and very compact and modular on the first ground. As a result, there are a lot of columns. But at the same time, on the second floor, we can save a lot of carbon footprint by not doing anything. So on the second floor is column-free. It's just a notion of closure and enclosure of spaces created by structure that hugs trees. And then we reduce a lot of carbon by making sure the facade is actually the ceiling, it's actually the roof, and actually the space itself. So by doing this, we save a lot of carbon footprint while finishing this project in a very short period of time. Sorry. And then And then we make sure that actually we still have a lot of balconies and public spaces to making sure all the direct sunlight is penetrating the glasses and the facade of the space is minimized. And then of course, because it's a bar during the nighttime, it has to act it as a lantern, and it could also act it as the property for the cities. So it's gonna be a beautiful pieces that we can enjoy as a pedestrian walking along the side. A very simple notion, really. So the building is very modular, and everything is very modular. As you can see on the ground, we have this 3x3 grid of Ulin timber. It's because all the MEP are going directly underneath. And because of that, the layout can be very flexible. You can change it to many permutation possibilities because of the modular grid notions. So the facade, it want to be disappears from each angle but one entrance. We think it's quite interesting spaces, and then believe it or not, in some days it could generate the same income as the competitor across it, which costs the investment almost 100 times of our investment. So this makes developer things. Oh, so we don't have to invest that much money, but we can rather focus on sustainable elements, and it could generate revenue, right? That's the virus we want to spread. And because of this project, now a lot of lifestyle developer was reconsidering their approaches. No longer cool to just block the whole thing without allowing any sunlight penetrating in, and the massive aircon, right? So we used to be yelled at if you are doing rooms with columns in between. I was saying there's a lot of things to see compared just to saying I don't want a column in my private rooms. And then by showing this true example, what we do is now, as far as I know, because of this project, there are 5 developers that is now doing the similar approaches nationwide for lifestyle businesses. Another key point that we want to show is this project. This project is also a coffee shop. In this project, we are experimenting how to do an architecture without a wall. So how can we create a space with nothing but just floor plate that acted as a canopy? And then during this study, we have decided to try 6 different axes that is not straight. Jadi nggak ada bidang datar di sini dan berbeda-beda semua. And then this all flat slab. Doing a flat slab with pigmented concrete in the earthquake environment is quite challenging. So this one is 12-meter cantilever and 4-meter cantilever up front. So it's actually quite challenging to making sure it's quite rigid during earthquake. That's why we have to combine with full structure, so concrete with 10 structure. So the vertical element is for the dead load, and then for the active movement of the earthquake, it is required for the pulling system from above. So as you can see, all the surfaces we submerge on the basement, semi-basement. Therefore, there are no kitchen. All the spaces are hidden, and then the way we reduce the carbon footprint is by making sure overlapping. So the structure is the ceilings as a facade, and the roof is also as a facade. So the honesty, and by true elimination of many percentage of the buildings, we can reduce a lot of energy, and while making sure the site plan is actually 1,000 square meters, we're just building 300, so that's 30% ground coverage. People kept asking me, why are you so stupid? Why don't you utilize the whole thing? So what I was saying, why don't we reserve the other 700 as the views, right? I mean, how much coffee can you sell anyway? So by doing this, actually the sales increased like crazy. And then the takeaway that we felt that we managed to pull it quite successfully is that the idea on this project is not about the form, it's not about the space, it's not even about how much energy can I save from the aircon, but I told developer, you don't have to build the whole things. So we just build in the places that has no trees, and then we let the rest of the sites untouched as a views. As you can see, it's a neighborhood area, so it's still got some houses around it. So it just managed to create canopies that shapes the facade, the ceilings, architecture, and integration with MEP, everything into one. Okay, so this is how it looks from above. Okay, so because we are still talking about the commercial side, maybe if you're talking about the starting of Radar, as I discussed, we are just 5 years old this year. So almost all of our project is our starting project. So there are some upcoming projects that we are looking for with the similar approaches. We think every project we're trying to create the new prototype that can spread like a virus for developer. In this project, it's quite difficult. We managed to convince the client to create a hotel that has no walls. So the main building is all compromised by just a giant roof sheltering on it. And many, many other projects to come. That each project we're trying to use different contexts of the site in which can be another prototype to educate developers in time to come. Many some more. Now we are trying to do more project in China because they have fully embraced these approaches, and hopefully once all the prototype in China is completed, we can bring back to Indonesia and convince more developers to embrace this philosophy. And then we are moving to the elephant in the room, is in which we think we make some changes, is housing design. We, back to our philosophy, we don't really do many houses design because we can inspire more people by doing public design. Back to the point in which we want to decentralize sustainable architecture. But it doesn't mean that actually sustainable houses doesn't make the changes. Actually, it makes most changes. Because actually the elephant in the room is most of architecture practices or DIY client, do-it-yourself client can only do some changes in their own house. So because we don't have many projects in housing, I'll just try to skim it through. In this project, we call it a passive lab house. In passive lab house, this is the experimental house in which we try to reduce the normal temperature up to 4 degrees Celsius without aircon and no artificial lights required during daytimes, in which we also harvest all the rainwater to be reused for all the landscapes. And then we're using all the circulation as the wind tunnel and wind chimney to make sure we release the heat within the house. It's a very simple design really, and then we're trying to make all the good spaces, all the nice spaces on the second floor and provide a gentle ramp to the uppermost floor. So all the rooms are actually double volume. Karena privacy kita nggak bisa share foto kamarnya, cuman the idea is that the wind chimney and the wind tunnel is actually making a contrast between the heat of the skylight and the very cold water reflecting area within, while making sure all the interior area has its opening during daytime. And then all the structures also serve as the to block direct heat going to the home, seperti bidang penangkal sinar matahari. The second home is actually also very simple. It's actually just a one-story home, and the whole idea is to create a giant roof hovering above the gardens, so as the rooms could act as a garden resort. And then they don't need the artificial cooling as an aircon because we make the whole thing naturally ventilated as a wind tunnel, and then making sure that during the daytime it requires no electricity. And then even we are doing aircon, we provide quite a lot of solar panels. So we haven't done the test, but I believe this building is almost net zero for the operational usage. Last in the housing is it's not complete until we talk about the housing in the expensive area, because then it's an ultimate. Because people used to say, oh, it's easy for you to say because the land price is cheap, right? But then, okay, we try to take up some challenges. How about we do some projects, and this one is at the Menteng area. Now per square meter is in approximately, I think, around 10,000 USD per square meter. So, of course, the client will not accept the idea of having a lot of greeneries. As most clients, they intend to build the whole things up. Jadi dibangun maksimal. And then finally, after many iterations, we managed to convince them, okay, I will give up this idea for you to build as much as we can, but in return, will you allow the ideas of we together creates a series of hidden garden within the house. So it's like a break on the rooftop. Sorry, yeah. So it's like a series of garden on the rooftop while they can still build as much as they can, but we want to create a sense of neighborhood within the home. It's like a series of many houses for big family within the house. So it appears from the facade as 2-story building, but what it is actually 5 stories building, including basement. Yeah. So every angle is different. It's like the whole neighborhood hovering over the garden and the swimming pool area, which connected by some bridges. But we try to make sure that we have stand by our principles. So all the stairs are actually shaft for releasing the air, and there's an anchor for cross ventilation on both ends, going directly from end to end. So each angle is different, ensuring. And then this picture was taken, I think, 6 months ago, but now it's way more green. And that's the way we hope our project to be appreciated through nature. It's getting more green day by day. Now if we have the chance to go into this house, it's very green. It's almost as the nature is taking over the whole roof, stepping roof area. So you can see what we want to inspire the other rich people to do the same, because they are the one who has the capital and has the ability to make the changes. Inspired from the previous presenter, 50% is on the client, right? Which I agree. So actually what we can do is just to inspire, and then hoping that they themselves can do the changes. Okay, that's that's 3 of the example of the houses that we do. There are many to come that embraces the idea to keep creating experimental that's easy to copy by others, so it can spread like a virus. And then another philosophy that we do in Radar in the early days is how can we make as much CSR project as we possibly could. So now if you ask our team, half of the projects we do in Radar is a CSR project. It meant we don't get paid for it. And then the challenge would be like how to build this CSR project, because the design is not the hard part. The hard part is how to find the funding to build these projects. That's the hardest part. Because we believe CSR project is the easiest way to spread sustainable architecture like a virus, because then people could, inspire to donate, they could build, they could find places, and then most big corporations have this budget for CSR projects. And then if you do religious buildings, they actually get tax breaks, dia dapat potongan pajak. Nah makanya kalau kita approach big company dan kita bisa bilang, you know what, you can do sustainable religious buildings. Mereka happy karena mereka dapat tax breaks a lot, right? So kalau kita mau paksa orang dengan capital to make the changes, we have to force them by giving an example. Now because of this project, it's easier for us to convince more big company to invest. Ini kita beruntung. I'm a Christian dan saya Chinese. So when we try to do mosque, people pikir kita Kristenisasi. So it was difficult before. But then during COVID, it's actually easier because people pray 5 times a day, right? And then when you told them, don't go to mosque, it's the place to spread the virus. And they say okay, if I die in mosque, I go to heaven. So it's very hard to communicate. And then we thought, oh, this is the opportunity. So we tried to build this project within 7 months. a lot of donation because people were concerned. That's why we can make it happen. The challenge was just the macro elements. The site is very hot. There's no greeneries. Therefore, we simulate many ways to make sure the building is actually sustainable and passively ventilated. But we did not succeed. So the only way this approach works is if we cover the whole roof by 90 centimeter of soils that reduce the temperature extremely from the environment. That's the only way. We have tested many ways, but nothing works because the environment around it is very hot. There's no cross ventilation anyway. So this is the only way we can do. And then this is quite expensive because we have to hold the whole soils on the roof. But by doing this, praying inside is like praying outside. And the facade changes. The facade, the opening changes. It gets smaller the higher it was to make sure it crossed it diagonally. I want to bore you with details, but this is very simple buildings. The approach you might think you can do this. I'm sure you can. That's the point of this. Is actually we try to inspire more architects and more people in Indonesia to reinforce them to do more sustainable approaches with capital mindset in mind. So most developer can adopt this approach. And also this plaza is also CSR project. Ini untuk teman-teman Muslim kita, dia punya kawasan pembuangan sampah gitu, terus kayak plaza yang nggak terurus. Jadi kita coba suggest to create landfill. Jadi sampah-sampahnya bisa kita uruk, sampah-sampah kita uruk, and then karena dia nggak ada existing trees at all, jadi ya kita coba buat hill, ya isinya sampah. Ya istilahnya seperti itu. Jadi kita landfill the whole things dan create different level untuk mereka activities. Ini pesantren untuk bisa berkumpul, belajar. Masalahnya adalah it has to be very visible because the education level masih banyak kondom bertebaran di taman. Jadi kalau banyak ruang-ruang ngumpet, wah itu udah tempat maksiat gitu. Jadi it has to be very visible and very open from every direction to making sure nggak ada funny business happen on the corner. That's one of many CSR projects that we are trying to build right now. Karena we have many prototypes of mosques, and now we're going to churches. It's just finding the capital to build it that is difficult. Lastly, I will close with this is also like the previous presenter, which I agree, is we start small, but we start small consistently. So we are deciding to do experimental in our own office. The simple thing, because if people that don't know Indonesia, they might criticize us. Why we keep building offices in residence area, right? That notion is not sustainable, which I disagree. Because based on the research, only less than 10% of businesses in Indonesia can afford retail spaces, right? So the actual impact of changes that we can do is actually how can we make a small home office more sustainable. That's the example and the prototype that we want to create. As you can see, ada abang-abang kopi. It's still in the deep of neighborhood. It's just green neighborhood. It is. Notion is very simple. If you ever had a chance to come and see, it's actually it's very simple things which we do on extreme east and west approaches. In which in the east side we're trying to build all the greeneries to reduce the heat extremely. On the west side, we are trying to harness the heat on the surface, so it creates an extreme temperature that makes sustainable. After 7 p.m. it doesn't really work, but from the morning until around 6 p.m. Cross ventilation works wonderfully. And then it appears as the building is quite deep and with small openings, but that's the purpose. We are trying to show the developer that sustainable architecture doesn't necessarily have a lot of openings. We are using black as an example. So if you bring your lux meters and you measure, it's actually more than 300 lux during the day. Why? Because I told them black absorb light. If I use white properties for the interiors, the lights that reflected on the lux meter is probably based on the reflections that comes. But if you do black, so all the measurement you get is from whatever penetrating the buildings. So we're playing with scales, depth of opening, and then some materials. I will not bore you with detail, but again, we harvest all the waters from the rain and we use it to water all the vegetation. Again, this picture was taken years ago, I think 2 years ago. If you come to our office now, it's like a jungle. The greenish just takes over everything. And that's the idea that we want, because it's a very simple thing. It's just a garden that was covered by a roof. And then our office latch on the second floor. On the first floor, we use it as a public spaces so people could interact. We can harvest more activities, and also it's a hub for creative designers in West Jakarta, which are not many. And it's very simple. On the west part, we harvest direct with some mirror properties. If you touch all the surface, it's actually very hot. But then our enemy is not really the heat, but the humidity. By creating this extreme temperature, as long as the wind flows more than 1 meter per second, the humidity was being taken away. By doing this, now we can create all the closure and enclosure, experimental, size-wise and distance and height, and the amount of green roof that was harnessed into 5 different double volumes juxtapositions, in which if you measure, each angle has different wind speed and also the lux lighting, natural lighting that penetrates. So that's the last slide that I want to close this presentation. This is the models. So lastly, what we're trying to emphasize is in Radar, what we're hoping to do is to create the virus that could be adopted by developer and by most people at home, maybe hopefully in the remote area in which the investment are low, by themselves. Thank you.